We're going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:31 p.m. on this 13th of April, 2017. Happy spring, everybody. Yes. Feels like the past 2 days we've gone from, I've been outside walking and enjoying the sun. The ground's starting to move and road permits are here, so. It's definitely springtime in Alaska. That's what we That's how I mark it, okay? It's on. First item is roll call. Mr. Denko.
Present.
Here. Mr. Hassan.
Here.
Mr. Lindemann.
Present.
Mr. Young. And actually, we have Ms. Long in place of Mr. Hart. So we have 7, and we do have 7 people, so we do have 4. Craig, would you mind talking about that?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public, and the public will be invited to comment. If you have a business item, have a presentation by staff or a consultant, the committee will then be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you very much. First item ahead of us is approval of the agenda. Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Bowles, seconded by Mr. Lindemann. Are there any opposed? Hearing none. The agenda is approved. We do have meeting minutes in front of us from the last time we met in February.
Move to approve the February 9th minutes.
Second.
Is that you, Abul?
Yes.
Okay. So moved by Ms. Howe, seconded by Mr. Hassan. Are there any opposed to approving the minutes for February 9th?
Are you taking abstentions since I did participated?
Okay. Anything else? Hearing no opposition? Did she abstain during the vote? Okay. Hearing no opposition, then the meeting minutes are approved. You have space. The nice thing is usually not in both sides to see what the committee's doing. Now I only have to look one direction. I know, this is easy. All right, first item ahead of us is action item 5A, the freight mobility study.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Before you today is a copy of the freight mobility study which we originally put out to the committee back in November, and the Freight Advisory Committee wanted to put it for more input. There were some issues raised by the community, it was the Citizens Advisory Committee, excuse me, and so to address that. And so you have a packet before you today, kind of outlines some of the goals and objectives of the freight mobility study. The Freight Advisory Committee chair is here. Roy Cummings and the team from HDR are here to answer questions also at the end. In the packet, you'll find the memo. Also, you'll find the comment response summary. There are over 35 comments, listenings, and votes. A resolution from the Community Council. We presented at the Community Council to answer questions and issues on a couple of projects that are listed in the freight mobility study. One project is an improvement project, which is not under freight mobility. The other project is also in the current MPP. Just to give you a heads up on that. And then also some questions and answers from the different freight routes. The freight routes that were originally on the traffic department website were some graphics that we had originally referenced, but they're not included in this plan. And they are older routes that were developed back when Dave Mumford was traffic engineer, Lee Krug was here. And so myself and Jay will be updating those. These freight routes are based on road classification systems. And so there were some questions raised by folks on those maps. So we are in the process of updating those. And if there is a new reference to them in the draft freight mobility study, we'll go ahead and update that accordingly. Also, there were some questions on tutor note, excuse me. And we just added some narrative on page 75, so we just added that extra sheet before you. And it was just to add the road into the narrative. It was on the map, but it was not in the narrative.
What was that, Ms. Riley?
Just tutor rules, new roads, it's on this sheet, page number 75. And it's under implementing recommended short-term rate policies. And on page 76, there's a map. And it is on the map, but it was not in the narrative, so we just updated that today. And of course, staff recommendation is to move forward with the approval of the draft rate mobility study to the policy committee. If you have any questions, we can have that.
Thank you. Please let the record show that Diane Satchel joined us at the inspection.
All right. Any questions from the committee at this time?
I have a question.
Mr. Sun?
As you were going through the public process, what sort of concerns, curiously here in sort of various sections of the community in relation to, take a look at page 76, and obviously you've got an outline of what the proposed regional truck route network will look like in terms of the routes themselves. And what I see is Muldoon, Tudor, AT, Minnesota, I can't make out, but the West Gate. But what sort of feedback have you gotten from the community in relation to pedestrian, walkability, access points, navigation, as people traverse these routes, which are proposed regional truck routes?
Right, there are already existing street routes as they exist today, and clearly, improvements to roads are needed for walkability, livability, all those things, and so they all have to coexist together. The Citizen Advisory Committee did review this, and we got their comments, and I'm going to turn to Lori. Was there any outstanding comments, or do you recall any major concerns of walkability on those particular corridors? I don't recall any per se.
Not on those corridors.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Going once, going twice? All right, so we're going to open for public comment at this time. If anybody from the public would like to comment on this, please make sure to state your name for the record. If it's a difficult to pronounce name, please spell it for the record. And then you're welcome to make your statement.
Where would you like me to be?
Wherever we can hear you.
Okay.
Right here.
Hi, my name is Kathy Gleason, CATHYGLEASON, and I'm currently acting president of Turnagain Community Council. And as you can see in your packet, we did provide some comments, and if you pardon me, I'm going to grab my cheater glasses here. With regard to truck route and truck use on West Northern Lights between Postmark Drive and Minnesota Drive, which of course provides a north access currently used. There's kind of a few things that we definitely had problems with, and attended the Freight Advisory Committee meetings, and they were very gracious in hearing myself and other board members' input from a council perspective on this. One of the things that really caught our attention initially was in the comment response document, where it said that the improvements to West Northern Lights between Postmark and Lakewood Drive to accommodate increased freight traffic. And considering that most of that distance goes through municipal dedicated parkland, Earthquake Park, and then you immediately hit almost exclusively residential Turnagain neighborhood between Nathaniel Court and Minnesota. We're very concerned about increased truck traffic through our neighborhood and through municipal dedicated parkland, and didn't want anything to initiate increased traffic. We're kind of at a toleration mode right now. And even though I've gotten complaints over the years, other council presidents have gotten complaints from neighbors about the extensive use of FedEx, mostly FedEx, UPS trucks, certainly other truck traffic. There's also Turnigan Elementary School, which is right on that road, and that's a big concern for us. So that's where our initial comments on that project, it's Project 119. A little confusing because I've got two different documents, two different versions of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. One projected cost was 14.9, another one was 19.9 or something, I don't know, 5 million, give or take. We're talking real money here. So Turnigan Community Council came up with an alternative idea with regard to eliminating any kind of project, construction project that would potentially increase speed and be more of an invitation for truck route to increase through our neighborhood. And that was for truck traffic from Postmark, take Lake Hood Drive up to Northern Lights. Lake Hood Drive is on airport property. It is a flat, wide shoulder, not heavily used road, well maintained by the airport year round. And it would be a much better way to get from their facilities on Postmark to the beginning of the residential neighborhood, in Turnigan, than spending perhaps up to $20 million on a road project through municipal dedicated parkland. And so one of the things that came up at our March council meeting, we have a representative from the airport, John Johansson, who attends our meeting every month, and we were discussing this. And he said, yeah, but then you've got 2 stop signs instead of 1. You've got right now there's a stop sign at Postmark, the way they go now, and then there isn't another stop sign as they enter the residential neighborhood. And with Lake Hood, you have a 4-way stop there at the snow dump intersection, and then you have one as you enter Northern Lights. So my husband actually recommended, why not get rid of that 4-way stop, just have the stop signs at the snow dump and on the road to the south, and eliminate the east-west stop signs. That would eliminate a stop. I don't know how much money it costs to remove 2 stop signs, but I'll bet it doesn't cost $20 million. And then you're down to just 1 stop, just like before. So we highly recommend that this body consider putting that alternative for consideration in the freight mobility study that you're about ready to take action on. The other thing that we identified is it's just not an ideal scenario at all for truck traffic to go through Northern Lights. We accept it, we know it's happening, but in terms of efficiency and time, I don't know how familiar all of you are with regard to that road, but once you hit West Northern Lights, if you turn on West Northern Lights from Postmark, you have 7 traffic lights, including the one at Minnesota. You have one at Arrow, you have one at the school crossing, you have one at Wisconsin Street, you have one at Turnigan Street, you have one at Forest Park Drive, you have one at Lois, and then you have one at Minnesota. If that's efficient for truck traffic, I'm amazed. I drive that all the time. I live on the very west end of the Turnigan neighborhood, so I go out off Wendy's Way on Northern Lights. Sometimes I hit the dice right and feel like I should go to Vegas, and I hit every one of them green. Other times, I hit almost every one of them red. When I drove to this area this morning, I hit 3 reds out of 7. Not bad. So I don't know how they determine efficiency and why they feel like they need to go through the Turnigan neighborhood to then move on. And these aren't local delivery trucks. They go straight to Minnesota and then out. But I think that it would behoove this body to take all of this into consideration and perhaps recommend to the policy committee, at the very least, to put an alternative use, at least till you get to the Turnigan neighborhood. But then even beyond that, point out all of the potential ways where they could be stopped literally before they get to Minnesota through a neighborhood that is exclusively residential with the exception of rustic goat. And, and then up until you get to the cars area. And in front of a Turnagain Elementary School where they're moving their morning freight delivery trucks right through morning school time. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to address that.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any questions specifically for Kathy?
Is there anybody else who would like to comment? Anyone at all? I'm gonna miss that of Elvie at the assembly meeting. She did it so precise. Anyone would like to testify? Anyone at all? Hearing none? We're moving on. She moves so quickly. All right, with that, the matter lies with the committee. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, not discussion so much, but another question. Was the notion of peak, off-peak delivery hours discussed as part of this?
Yeah, one of the case studies was included in that, and it was a larger metropolitan area, I believe, that they looked at. It could have been even New York. You know, obviously, we're a smaller geographical area, so that may or may not work. Those types of techniques may or may not work as effectively in Anchorage, but it's certainly something that we can take a look at. I think maybe one of the issues there is electronic entry into certain businesses and key cards may be part of the concern there. I don't know, but Aves Thompson may be able to address that as far as the Alaska Trucking Association and some of that concerns.
Madam Chair, I'm Aves Thompson, Chairman of the Freight Advisory Committee, and we talked about that issue. And if we look at the FedEx and the UPS commodities that are being delivered, they're packages that are going to businesses and small to residents. Typically, offices are not open during evening hours or some other time where traffic would be lessened. I know there's concern about increased freight traffic on West Northern Lights. It was never the Freight Committee's intention to promote this as a major truck route for truck tractors, semi-trailers, or long combination vehicles. Simply to the project, as we had envisioned it, would be to just make the necessary improvements to provide for a safe operation and for an efficient operation. And you know, there was no effort here to develop any larger scale use of West Northern Lights. But it is a useful road that's been used for 30, 40 years, back access to the airport. And so those are the kind of issues that we talked about.
Thank you. So my overall concern is just, maybe it can be split two ways. I worry that, well, what does the passing of the resolution mean? Is it a binding effect? That means that for the next, whatever the next iteration is for the renewal, that sort of binds an ability for a community or even us to have the conversation of trying to put forth or implement concepts such as off-peak or off-peak use for freight. And two, does that sort of bind a conversation moving forward with other open plans through AMATS about the conflict between freight mobility and truck routes and pedestrian walkability when you sort of channel both? And I don't know who can sort of answer that, but I just need to know, is it a binding effect, or does that still leave room for conversation down the line? For example, take complete streets. So as we move forward and we begin to discuss complete streets and context-sensitive solutions, what is the bearing on signing off on this in relation to that?
Well, I think that first, number one, AMATS is federally mandated to provide multimodal access and opportunity and mobility, so I think that's what you're charged with as your mission, and that also includes freight. Now, granted, freight's only 6% of the overall traffic in the area, but if we're going to eat and we're going to get goods and do these things, we have to all work together, and I think you have been doing that. You have a bike plan, you have a freight mobility plan, you have a trails plan, you have an overall MTP, and I think in the overall MTP, MTP, you're looking at how the entire network works together. And freight's just a piece of that. It's just an element of that. And so I think you can make them all work and play together. You develop policies that you can implement. A plan is just a plan. There's certain projects that you will implement or not, depending upon funding.
Can I just kind of speak a little bit to you, I guess, is my role in this, in project development, really, when I like seeing, in the conversations I've had about wanting to see an updated freight plan, like map, identifying what we consider primary corridors, specifically what needs to happen for doubles. The doubles was an agreed upon route between DOT and MOA, part of the national highway system, making sure that the goods could get into and out of Anchorage, because our port is serving not just Anchorage, but the entire state. It's more so that when we are doing project development and we're looking at making these decisions, when we're specifically looking at an intersection, we recognize what the design vehicle needs to be in those spaces. And it's not saying that we ignore that peds and bicyclists also need to use that intersection. But when I'm looking at the intersection of Tudor and C, I need to make sure that it can accommodate the large trucks that are turning there. And unfortunately, there are always compromises. But being able to recognize where we can say, yes, freight needs to be a priority on these primary areas. Vice versa, I've also made the decision on several municipal projects that I do not provide for large truck turning movements, and that they will have to actually trip plan and take a left turn into the neighborhood rather than a right, because I'm not accommodating the really large sweep on the corner. So in my opinion, having something in front of you that at least guides the planning level, so when you take it to design, I have those considerations. But like any plan, I never feel that it dictates design to me, and it's always going to be on a case-by-case basis on what's specific to the context out there. I guess that's how I've used these plans in the past, in documents. Did I accurately characterize that?
Madam Chair, I agree with you. You have to remember that the Freight Advisory Group is composed of generally non-engineers, non-technical people. These are people from industry who deal in logistics and movement of freight. What we tried to do in this plan is to identify areas of priority or areas of concern. And say, we have a concern with a particular intersection, or we think that maybe this area might be improved. We're not trying to dictate any specific project specifications or plans. That will all be worked out in the process as a project moves through the planning stages to final completion. So we're not trying to dictate how and when you do something. What we're trying to do is make our observations on what we think would help move freight safely and efficiently within the Anchorage Bowl.
I do have one question for you, Kathy, regarding, you specifically mentioned Project 119. Is that the project that is for the upgrade of West Northern Lights Boulevard between Postmark and Lakewood Drive?
Yes.
And is that is that the project that's actually specifically mentioned in the MTP? Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
I do have a comment. The policy map that's referred to in this document says that it will be replaced by a new adopted policy map. We are not going to have a new adopted policy map, but a new land use plan map, which will provide greater specificity in terms of land use type, land use designations. So it won't be just such a bubble diagram. Okay. And then the other comment is on page 72, there's an extensive section about education, about workforce education and community education. I think we need to also, once we have these routes designated, that there should be also an emphasis with the actual trucking industry as well, to let their drivers know which are the routes, and so that they can utilize those routes rather than picking the shortest line between A and B and making up their own routes.
Yeah, that was the reason that one map that traffic developed with recoup and Dave Mumford originally was to help them know which routes to take.
So if that narrative could be placed in this section, that'd be great.
Just for, I guess, a point of information as well, every building permit that comes through that has any sort of hauling activity comes through traffic to be reviewed, and we ask every project to provide a haul route. And we specifically require them to follow hierarchy of roads, what is required by, strictly by Title IX, and using, primarily, it always ends up being, they can use a highway, use a highway. If not a highway, you step down and you use a major arterial. If not a major arterial, you step down to the minor arterial. And really, when you step down to those collectors, it's only generally because you're going to a place that you have to get onto a collector, and you're supposed to use Class 1 or Class 1A. And if you're having to use a collector or local road, it's because your destination is specifically on that road. And so we do review that with every building permit that comes through, specifically for that. So when it comes to those sorts of activities, and when it comes to public projects as far as DOT or MOA projects, we also review those.
So that's the catch. Building permits come in when the building is being altered. So if that warehouse doesn't get altered for 10, 15 years down the line, then how are those folks going? How do we as
Yeah.
MOA review that
Yeah.
aspect?
It's related to the construction, it's not related to the direct operations of their
Operations, yep.
facilities. Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair, unless I'm mistaken, I'll be passing a vote to move this on to the policy committee. And if that is the case, then does a change in the narrative as requested here require an amendment? Or in terms of mechanically the process itself, or can it be made? Because I just want to make sure.
You make
Correct motion,
Yes.
who makes the motion?
Motion to, it's not mine because we're making adjustments, but motion to make an amendment to the narrative.
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to move to motion to move it, and then you make edits to the motion, and then you approve with the edit.
So motion to move to edit the freight mobility study.
No, I think you have to move to
recommend
approval of the freight mobility study.
Recommended to PC.
Motion to move to recommend the approval of the freight mobility study.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Hassan, second by Ms. Howe.
Now you can make a formal edit.
Now you can make formal edits. And then we can individually.
So I'd like to move to make an amendment to page 72 where the education is, to provide, just let staff provide the paragraph to just provide the narrative that describes how we will encourage the freight businesses or whatever to have periodic or regular education of the established truck routes.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing the motion.
The motion was to include additional text on page 72 within the education section to have, now it's, I guess, how do we want to say this? To have, are we talking AMATS staff reach out?
To write it, to include language in there that the freight operators be encouraged to review and with their employees the established truck routes as provided in this plan on a regular basis. Because as Stephanie pointed out, unless that business comes in for a building permit, we don't look at that issue. And so if a business doesn't come in for 10, 15 years down the line, that's quite a window of not having that conversation with your folks.
Thank you.
question for Lori. Do you think you could appropriately summarize that?
I think so.
Second?
Okay. So do we do each, we can do each individual amendment, correct? If we want to. All right. So that would move secondly to that amendment. Are there any opposed to that amendment? Okay, hearing none. That amendment, if the whole motion, that amendment is approved. Okay. Are there any other edits? Amendment? Then we're back to the main motion, which is recommend approval to the policy committee. Are there any opposed to that? Okay. Hearing none, we'll be to the policy committee for their decision.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment? I just want to say thank you to the Technical Advisory Committee and to all the AMATS staff for the hard work that's gone into this study. We spent a lot of time on it, and we appreciate your patience and your understanding on, and allowing us to recognize, to identify to you our views on the movement of freight, and both. So thanks again, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Abe. Wow. It's like a throw of paper. All right, next item before us is item 5B, the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Update Public Involvement Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Vivian Underwood. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner. For this item, you have a memo, and you have the draft public involvement plan for this project, the 2040 MTP, and a comment response. And the project is off and running. We're getting started, and we are coming before you today to ask for approval of the public involvement plan with any recommended changes. We provided the copy of this draft to you all and to the Citizens Advisory Committee on March 24th, and to the and to the so we have some of those comments included in the Citizens Advisory Committee too. It turns out that because we're using the Citizens Advisory Committee for the first time for the MTP, a lot of questions came in and comments about the internal process, which was kind of interesting. So some of those things will have to be worked out with the staff as they go on about the internal workings of it. As you can tell from the comment response summary, that most of the recommendations are just varied. And on the column on the right are the recommendations that staff is recommending, and they're highlighted in yellow. Most of them are administrative edits. I would just like to clarify a couple of them that people may have had a question about. I don't know. One is on page 7. It's number 40. And the change there is where it says, over the context, instead of use the first person narrative, for example, where it says we are going to do this and we are going to do that, to change that to a proper noun, AMATS or whatever it is, to make it more formal. And then on page 11, comment number 62, there were just some strikeouts, and we correct those. And then our comment, one comment of ours is on page 25, to delete all the specific contacts, people's names and telephone addresses on the project. And instead, what we're going to do is use this icon. It also appears in the public participation plan throughout to make it simpler for the public to go one-stop shopping for comments. So we think that makes sense. And just to clarify, you all adopted the AMATS public participation plan in January 2017. And This plan, neither this plan nor the federal regulations require us to have individual project participation plan. Do it because it's a good idea. And this plan just highlights in a general way what the public to for milestones and how they can be involved. It points you to the website, which is up and running today. And it also points to the documents, the deliverables that will have a specific review process. We wanted to keep it simple and clean and not complicated. And people can go to the website for more information, but this is just to get us started and let people have an idea of what to expect with this project plan. We received some comments from Ms. Heil. I think that was mostly dealt with the process for using the Citizens Advisory Committee, and I think that is going to be worked out with the staff as we go along, how to work with them. We had originally talked about we were going to have a call for nominations, and for the call for nominations, we need the criteria, the selection criteria that we'll talk about later in the information item. But rather than trying to do a workaround to have full public review, we'll be coming to you all and ask for release of those criteria for public review for 2 weeks, rather than trying to rely on the Citizens Advisory Committee process for that. So, does anybody have any questions or comments?
I'm hoping that, well, I'm kind of hoping that we're going to go through
The individual comments?
Yeah.
The edits that we recommend, or every single comment?
pretty much every comment. I
Okay.
think this is really important to go through. It's our number one most important document is the MTP. This is the first stage, make sure we have the participation plan and it's in really good shape and that we move forward on the right step.
This is going to take quite a bit of time, and I'm happy to do that, but for other documents, I have to tell you, it would really help if you all could do this ahead of time. And when Jamie has created a wonderful spreadsheet, a wonderful way to provide comments that will create a spreadsheet for us. And I think that it's whatever you want to do.
I'm just making a suggestion, it's not just because I suggest this means it happens.
Well, I guess we'll should leave that to decide.
Are there any questions or comments? Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Mr. Longby?
Are we looking to vote on this and recommend it for the policy committee?
No,
No.
you're going, the technical advisory committee will be approving it. We're not going to approve.
For our use?
Beg your pardon?
For our use at this point?
It will be for the entire project. It will be posted on the website, the project website, and we don't anticipate any changes to it. We're not providing a detailed schedule in here, so we don't anticipate.
Is it on the critical path of anything? Meaning if we don't approve it today, we approve it next month?
No, nothing is due to dependencies, but we just wanted to get it out. I guess I should, is it, I can't finish it.
Basically, it governs all of our public involvement for
Yes.
everything related to this plan.
Okay, well, I understand that, but, you know, as we get down into the general information, I think I sent an email to you earlier today that I got some substantial concerns about some other stuff that's probably going to require a working group meeting at some point. And if we've got concerns, you know, I agree with Ms. Heil that we probably need, you know, give this the measure that it's due. And we've got 2/3 of a forest to get through yet, as far as paperwork goes, you know. If we're gonna have potentially a working group meeting on that other thing, maybe we just lump it all together and just knock it all out at once, and include this as part of it, table this or postpone this till the next meeting until we can go through all these. It's a suggestion. I go either way. I
Got nothing better to do now.
Madam Chair, could Catherine Wood, who is managing the public involvement for HDR for this project, sort of.
I just wanted to make a comment in terms of dependencies, that yes, approving this document is really important. Essentially, you know, we want to get this under our belts before we go forward with any public announcements, advertisements, emails, etc. We have tentatively been talking about holding a public meeting in the next couple of months, and so we really do need approval before we can move forward with any of those other concerns.
And I understand that, but if it's April 13th or May 11th or whatever day it works out to be, are we going to crush any schedules by, like I said, moving this to another time, considering the volume of other stuff we have to get through?
Well, we hope to have the first public meeting in June, and we'd like to give
That would be
people, but also I feel that we need to get the information to people a little bit earlier than just right before the public meeting. We need to let people know that the website is up and running and the project is gearing up. And I do want to reiterate too that this is consistent with the public participation plan that you already adopted and already went out for a 45-day public review period. It's not inconsistent with that. So if you have wordsmithing issues or that kind of thing, that's easily worked out. But I do understand Catherine's perspective.
I'm just trying to balance what we have in front of us, what we have coming up, and what we probably ought to do as far as going through this.
If we have a work session, the committee might consider doing the two things at the same time.
I think we could probably knock a lot of this off, just talking about it and doing it.
A lot of these edits are just
I know, but they're
administrative edits.
But there's still some things I think there should be chatting about. And
absolutely.
We can provide comments. I mean, I can read this and provide comments, but the value of a meeting is talking about it with each other, because that's the whole point of this, is that I can have plenty of comments, but my comment back to you is relevant. It's the body, the decision of the body. So, and I think it's our responsibility to go through our comments and response tables, and we've done this in the past. Maybe not necessarily for the public involvement program, but we go through every single item on tips and MPP in the past. We've extended meetings, we've had 3 meetings in a row sometimes, we've done.
It's on public review drafts.
Yes, yeah, so this is our basis.
Right. I can't recall what the process was for the public involvement plan for the 2035 NTP. I don't.
I have a question.
so many different
I
ones.
know.
This is-
I have a question on timing, though. We do have 2 other business items. I don't know how long it will take us to get through those. The question, we already approved the agenda. The question is whether or not we want to reorder the agenda to take care of the other business items and come back to this. And then we take as long as we need to with this, and it may end up meaning that some of the informational reports may not happen.
Yes, but-
If we're going to.
Preference of the committee.
I appreciate that, because I do think we really need to get approval on this as soon as possible. And I have to tell you, we have to stay on schedule for next time when we come before you for the other items. It would really be helpful if you all could have your thoughts together and maybe share them with the rest of the committee before, so when we do come together, we can maximize and optimize our time together.
I recommend the work session. I really do. If you want an accelerated timeline and to be as efficient as possible, you need to get a work session, because it's very difficult otherwise.
So, and this is a question, I guess, for a point of order. We've already kind of opened this topic. We have no motions. I have not opened it for public comment. If we were to reorder this and move this later,
Yeah, move the table.
okay, and then we could open it for public comment at that time.
So I'll move the table to the end of the action items.
Second?
Moved by Ms. Lindsay, second by Mr. Howell. Are there any opposed to that motion?
I'm into despair.
You're in despair. You lost all hope. Okay, so that's good with you. All right, so then, we have
okay.
item 5, report, maintenance forum memo.
Okay, so hopefully this will be an easy item, never can tell. And so this is a memo coming from the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It actually was generated, well, the beginnings of it were generated this winter, when we were having such big snowfalls, and we were having a lot of sidewalks, or a lot of folks calling in, complaining about not being able to get around. As you can recall, there were 2 heavy pedestrian fatalities this winter, and I think after the second one, the BPAC decided to address the issue of maintenance, or see if this could be an opportunity to discuss how to do maintenance better, more efficiently, at less cost, in light of the budget cuts that the state and the city are both facing. So in essence, this memo just recommends that AMATS host an interagency forum, which gives all the agencies the opportunity to come together and discuss maybe challenges that they're facing, how could we make partnerships or improve how things are being done now to make sure that next year and the years following, if we're still having these budget issues, we can just do a little bit better at serving the non-motorized community, especially with regards to disabled folks who are trying to get around and can't basically go anywhere when the sidewalk's not plowed and things of that nature. So it's just a recommendation for hosting an interagency forum, and that's about it. It's pretty simple. So do you have any questions?
Mr. Lindenberg, was I first? Yeah.
I do believe this is an issue. I guess I see it as an action item, but I'm not entirely clear exactly what the action is. So if we say, yes, go do this, I mean, does this just go to AMAT staff and they set something up, or?
This would be an action item. The Technical Advisory Committee says, yes, we agree this is a good idea. That goes forward to the Policy Committee. If they think it's also a good idea, then we schedule an interagency forum. Yeah.
So, but I'm recommending this approach, then what it would be AMATS funds, and it would be setting it all up and running the forum and running all that stuff, correct? Which is kind of why you're going to the policy committee to okey-dokey AMATS staff to do it.
Right, and I think, and since it was coming through the BPAC, sort of, seemed logical.
Well, the policy committee is directed that all memos, all letters that come from those other advisory committees all have to come to the TAC before they go to the policy committee.
Any questions or comments?
Does staff have any sense of who they might be inviting to be on this forum, interagency forum at this?
I think general, and certainly not, this could include other agencies, but public transit, DOT, Parks and Rec, AMATS, traffic certainly, Health and Human Services, any other ones. We're open to ideas as well. So.
I don't know whether right-of-way enforcement or code enforcement would probably need to be a part of the discussion.
I think it's kind of for staff to do some research on kind of state of the practice and see if someone's got a bright new shiny idea in Madison or Calgary or Edmonton or something. Gather that information and then get the people who do the actual work, the M&O folks from the state and from the community, and get them in the room together and say, here's some suggestions we found. This is kind of what they're doing there. Do you think this is something that might work here, so we can, don't reinvent the wheel, but see if someone else has done it and it's worked and they've got some good idea. So that's what we're trying to figure out. We're all trying to do more with less, and here's an opportunity to try and figure out the state of the practice that might work better.
See it as a broader issue than that. Some of it's priorities, right? It's not just, do we have something we do zap snow and make it go away instantly as we drive by. It's do I plow the road, or do I plow the sidewalk, or do I plow this bike path, and in what order do I do that in, and what are the ramifications of that choice? So I think it's more than that. I think there's actually, personally, get on my soapbox here, my biggest criticism of the whole bike plan was using the coastal, or the trails, as their primary east-west connectors. And the reality is, they're not plowed, ever, for reasons. But, you know, it's one of the things that's exacerbated the problem, because if you don't plow the sidewalks and you don't plow the trails, then you've got nothing. And so I think it's gonna have to spill beyond the what's the latest and greatest stuff that we can do to melt snow, and look more from, you know, policy type decisions and things like that. It can't be limited to just what can we make snow go away with, short of burning coal in my front yard, so.
And then couple that with education.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it could be, just people don't understand that there's delays, and it's gonna take time, and
Yeah.
maybe the main roads first before you're ever gonna get to a sidewalk.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I think Craig's mentioned of looking at other places. We were just at the Madison, the mayor of Madison came and did a presentation, and currently in Madison, they plow all the roads first, and then they plow all the bike lanes and bike facilities second, and then they do neighborhood. So your personal residential street wouldn't get plowed until all the bike facilities are plowed. That's just how they do it there. So it'll give us an opportunity to look at. And in Finland, for another example, on the trails, like they don't even plow the trails, they just park them down. And so like a winter like this, actually you could bike on the trail most year round. But after a heavy snowfall, it's hard. You can't go anywhere unless something's done, so yeah. Any other questions or comments for Jody?
I would make the recommendation that research what the legal obligation is, utilizing federal funds for ADA accessibility in relation to the Department of Justice. And I think that needs to be a major component of something like this, especially when we're talking about accessibility. So therefore, it's no longer a recommendation; it's a requirement. I guess is the difference.
Good point.
So, you looking for a motion?
No, we have to open for
Oh,
public
I'm
comment
sorry.
first.
That's
I was asking if there's any more questions. Any more? All right, at this time, it is open for public comment. Is there anybody here that would like to speak? Anyone at all? Hearing none now? Oh, sorry.
Gloria Mani, a resident of the West Anchorage.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Gloria Mani, M-A-N-N-I.
Thank you.
I participate for a local group for safe route to schools, and I'd like to see included here if the schools are aware of what happened on heavy snowfall winters, where the roads are not cleared all the way to the sidewalk. And where I live on Hillcrest, close to Hillcrest Drive, going to West High, is not, clear completely, and the kids literally had to walk way into the car path. So I don't know who is the person that could be best contribute to it. I'm sure it's not the only area in Anchorage where that occurs, but we'll recommend that you involved also the schools somehow. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? No? All right, now Madison.
Madam Chair, I'll move for whatever this is.
Recommended.
I don't know what.
It says it's the first sentence. So moved by Mr. Mahmood, seconded by Ms. Howe. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none. The item so moved.
So Stephanie, we can assume like people comment to,
Yeah, the EDA.
environmental justice
That's a
will be.
comment for the, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'd say that my comment about right-of-way or code enforcement and the comment about including the school district and staff heard all those recommendations and will be part of the meeting minutes.
Yep.
Expressed during the forum. Thank you. item before us is the Freight Advisory Committee appointment.
Okay, so the airport is a member as called out in the bylaws of the Freight Advisory Committee, and Katie Gage was on that, filling that position for a while. She is moving out of state, so the person that she replaced originally, Terry Lissett, has agreed to come back on to fill that seat again. So she was there when the committee was first created, I believe. And so this is basically a new appointment that's kind of a reappointment. We're asking you to recommend the policy committee that addition.
Any questions? Are there any questions or comments from the public?
Wait on approval for the Freight Advisory Committee appointment of Cherry with the policy committee.
Second.
To the Freight Advisory Committee,
Oh, what did I say?
Policy Committee.
Well, the Freight Advisory Committee appointment of Cherry.
No, you're recommending it to the Policy Committee.
Got it. I was like.
Seconded, got it. Moved by Ms. Powell, seconded by Mr. Rutherford. Are there any opposed to the appointment, or recommending the appointment, I should say?
Hearing none. All right, so that brings us back, we got through our other business items, that brings us back now to the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. What? No, we're
Doing
continuing
action
our
items
action
first.
items. We're doing our action items first before continuing. So, I'm rusty on, do we discuss, will we go through these individually first and then open for public comment?
How do we usually do
I
this?
think we do them all.
Usually do the questions, we do public, then we do a motion to open it, and then we go through each one, because we might be doing edits as motions or not a motion, and then we close. Does that make sense?
I think so. Is that correct?
It is, but if your public has comments or edits on whatever you want to, they can't do it in the motions made. So you can open up for discussion before you comment and then go back and.
You do a page at a time.
It's up to you.
Okay.
Easy one,
Well, sometimes that's hard about when you get, when the public comments.
I'm talking about when we have the public comments. I mean,
yeah,
really,
still
we
there.
go through them individually, discussing them, public comment. I mean, I'm sure you want to.
Usually just do public comment on all these, we have no, what we do with them in our business. Absolutely.
Okay. We've already had, I guess, a good amount of discussion. Are there any questions or comments from the committee before we open this specifically for public comment?
Just regarding, it's a minor item, if we could sort of replace the mention of people mover in lieu of public transportation department, where you see those references, that would be great.
So we're using people mover in the document, and you want public transportation department, yes. Madam Chair, may I ask the committee?
Sure.
Perhaps it would be a good idea if we had a standing work session set up in this process before the TAC meeting so that we can best utilize your time. And we will be getting the tech memo number 2 to you shortly, which is the deficiency analysis. And we had already planned to have a work session for that and for the alternatives analysis. But just in case something comes up, I mean, Lori had actually suggested that, and I think it's a good idea. I want to know what you all think.
I guess we can, discuss as a committee. I guess I'm in favor of having a standing work session kind of put in place on my calendar, because as my time books up, if I have it booked at least and we don't need it, I can very easily pull it off my calendar, but if I don't have it on there and then we need to put one in, it gets very problematic.
Yeah.
So,
If we could just make it regular times on Thursdays, like the Thursdays we're not normally here.
well, then you're in, well, I guess the Thursdays we're not here is the policy committee meetings. We don't meet at the same time though.
So it could be the first or the.
Four Thursdays, we got two wiped out.
First or the third, we wouldn't have anything.
We have met before for work sessions just prior to this meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we'll need, though. And if we have to continue it, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if we wait until a week before we have this meeting, and if anything needs to change, or if we have any major change, it has to, if it's an action item the following week, you have to have it posted and ready 7 days in advance of the meeting. So we'd be better off doing it, these are these are the second week, so it'd be better doing it the third week.
You want it right before, or you want it right after?
I figured right after.
Yeah.
Third?
Third week, after it's introduced, you mean?
No, I mean after this.
After this meeting?
Yeah.
So this is the second
Because
Thursday.
we're usually always on the second Thursday, correct?
Uh-huh.
And the policy committee is on the fourth Thursday.
I have to post everything the first Thursday of the month
Yeah.
for it to be
So
compliant.
then we got all the Thursdays
That's
covered.
just-
First Thursday you post, second we meet, third work session, fourth policy, if there's a pitch, then we get those.
Aaron?
Having it right after is basically going to throw off the schedule for getting any documents done, because we're going to have everything done way earlier than anticipated.
I would say before the meeting.
That-
Probably the same week. So if on Monday, you had your work sessions of the week, and Thursday you have your meeting, there's time between if an issue comes up on Monday to get resolved and information, so that Thursday when you actually are working on your action item, that information can be brought forward.
If there's any changes to the document, it'll have already been posted and available to the
No,
public.
we won't change the document.
Okay.
What you do is you're having a work session on all the material,
And then you'll take action.
and then you take action
Yeah.
with all of it, but if there's something else comes up that wasn't anticipated, then you could discuss it in a public forum. And it's already on the agenda, that that's gonna be a topic you're gonna be discussing.
Yeah, Mondays on the railroad are horrible. We let the railroad run itself for 2 days, we gotta get back in there. Screw it up.
Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but the earlier the better.
Yeah.
So is Monday a good day for everybody? No.
The fire
Brian says no.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say we might need to do a poll. It
On the week
depends, it
before.
depends on the Tuesdays.
Yeah, it depends on the Tuesdays.
Is Friday-
Wednesdays I'm at AMATS.
Is Friday a good day? The Friday before?
Generally, unfortunately, I say Mondays and Fridays are bad days, and the reason why I say that is because holidays. That's the only reason why I say that, is holidays tend to fall on Mondays or Fridays, so that always pushes things to
Well,
Tuesdays.
let's think of Tuesday and get it for
I'm standing every Tuesday sort of thing, so that it doesn't get overrun with other events.
Right.
And you mean the day, the Tuesday before the Thursday meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Second Tuesday of the month.
There you go.
It'll have to be in the morning.
Like that.
Do you all want to get back to us on the time? On a, we-
We'll
do
do another poll.
do a poll?
We'll do it.
Thank you.
We're on it.
Hey, Tom.
Well, this is where you're gonna get thrown off. The second time, sometimes the second Tuesday of the month is actually after the TAC meeting, just FYI. Because depending on where the beginning of the month falls, the second Thursday
The
ends up
Tuesday
being.
of the week.
So you're saying the Tuesday of the week you have that. The problem is I have reoccurring meetings on the first Tuesdays of months, so
I have-
sometimes it's going to
I
be
have
weeks, so.
Great confidence in Jamie's ability to schedule these correctly.
Fridays.
No doubt.
We'll get it.
You can do Saturdays when there's a blue moon and an inversion while there's.
I just want to
I'm not that good.
I feel like I'm trying to schedule something with my family right now. We're so busy. All right, so work session, we're gonna have to do work sessions. I know, so now I'm gonna ask, are there any public comments regarding the public comments that have been made on the public involvement plan. We're gonna go by this item by item, so if you'd like to, Kathy.
So again, Kathy Gleason, Turnagain Community Council Acting President. Thank you, Chair. Chair and members of the commission, I just scanned this briefly this morning because I saw it was on the agenda, so I am not speaking for the council. We haven't voted on anything. This is just my observation from being a very, very long time, 35 years, in fact, member of the council and involved with community councils. I'm concerned, let's go to page 4 of the document, where it addresses 3 large public meetings. And the first one would identify issues, goals and objectives, criteria. Those are things that really set the tone for the rest of the plan, and that's a pretty important meeting. So when I hear that the first public meeting is scheduled for June, I know that we should all be available 24/7, 12 months out of the year. But to hit that first meeting right at the beginning of the summer, when so many people are not engaged from a public perspective for so many reasons, but speaking for a community council perspective, we meet June 1st, and then we don't meet in July or August. A lot of councils don't even meet in June. They take 3 months off in the summer. So that's a big concern for me. I don't have any good suggestions, but I wanted to make sure you take that into consideration as far as scheduling. Also on page 4, you've got a list of ways to do outreach, and they all look good. The one thing that I'm not noticing, but maybe it's buried somewhere else in the document, is emails to groups that then can get the word out to their members or their subgroups. And from, again, a community council perspective, making sure that the Federation of Community Councils is notified so that they can get the word out to all the other all the 36 individual community councils. I don't know if this is the appropriate place to add this, but it's something I think that should be added somewhere on the list when you do outreach. But then on page, let's see here, page 9, this is an issue, and I'm not sure I have any solutions, but I think it's an issue. This is on page 8 and 9 is table 1, potential stakeholders. And listed as a potential stakeholder on page 9 under continued community groups, non-governmental organizations, and others, Federation of Community Councils is listed. And if you're not heavily engaged in community councils, you probably may not realize this. The Federation of Community Councils is an umbrella organization that receives municipal funding to operate an office. We have an office manager, and it just is their sole purpose. The sole purpose of this organization is to then support individual community council meetings. There's 36 councils, I think. So to have one person from the Federation of Community Councils represent the entire community council family throughout the municipality is not appropriate. I happen to be the delegate for Turnagain on FCC's group, and our responsibility as delegates is not to provide that role at all. And so to engage individual community councils, because we're all stakeholders, we're there by charter, and we get notified of every road project that comes along. So we're all stakeholders as far as council members. The Federation of Community Councils should not be listed as a stakeholder. It's not appropriate. So then to list someone from each community council would be very burdensome. I don't have any answers, but this is not the appropriate way to engage community councils, which should be considered under your stakeholder title heading. So I hope that is good feedback, and I'll let you figure out how you may want to resolve those kinds of approaches as far as community councils.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I answer that one?
Yes.
So, and this might help with a lot of the questions that are in the table, a lot of the things that came up were related to the list of stakeholders. And what we want to really, really emphasize is the fact that this is a list, as it says, of potential stakeholders. We are going to contact a lot more people than this with all the different methods that we use. This is potential. There will be more groups added to this list. There will be more groups contacted. We certainly will contact the community councils individually. They will get our email blasts that we always send out. They will see all of our notices. They'll be invited to all of our meetings. But the choice was to put nobody on the list or start adding to the list, and then you just continue adding because someone says, hey, how about the school district? It's like, we forgot that, sorry. So this is potential. We are willing to listen to any suggestions for who we should reach out to. In some cases, we'll be reaching out to them via email or any of the different things kind of in bulk. In some cases, we'll be reaching out to individual groups to have an individual group meeting, just depending on the group. But we are planning on as robust a public involvement process as we possibly can. So hopefully that answers a lot of the concerns on who's on the list and who isn't on the list. It's not all inclusive. We'll add any suggestions that people have for who we have missed or we need to make sure we reach out to.
Should you add a note to that effect on these things?
That's a comment in the comment response.
We sent this out, we have comments, but we didn't change anything in here until the committee says, fix this, change this, we agree with that comment sort of thing. Yeah, it's like,
Are there any other comments from the public on the public involvement plan? Hearing none? That was committee.
Move to approve for discussion the AMATS public enrollment plan for the MCP.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Brown, seconded by Ms. Salinas. And this is the discussion. So do we want to go item by item, or?
We could probably do by pages. I'll start off. Okay, so the reason I wanted to have a discussion primarily once we got into this was the list of comments from the Citizens Advisory Committee, specifically about what their role is. And this is our first big test for using the Citizens Advisory Committee since it was taken, since we developed it from planning and zoning. All right. So planning and zoning had its problems, as we'll remember. It took forever to get them on that agenda. Took forever to do anything with it, and then by the time we got it out, so the Citizens Advisory Committee was set up. It's not required. A little background for everybody. To provide comments and a way to get input from the citizens on our big plans and projects and other things. It was supposed to allow more flexibility and a way of getting more comments in, because that's usually what we get hit on most when we're federally reviewed for our criteria. So, given that, I don't think we should think that just because this is how the Citizens Advisory Committee worked in the past, that we should be limited to that, and that we should look at creatively at how we want to utilize this group of people to really provide information to all of our plans. So I think this is critical. And they have very good points in their comments, because there's items that we don't have them formally, and it may not be that you're intending that we don't need to necessarily have them formally itemize every little thing that they would get an opportunity to be reviewing. But I think they at least have to have the ability to provide formal comments. And so especially number 6, the But they should have an opportunity, and they should be called in, not just quarterly, but as needed. Bring in a quorum, have them vote, have them make formal comments, and get them in. And then the public should have the opportunity to know when these things are happening, so they can come in and provide comment during those meetings with their citizens representatives. So, I know what you're trying to do, I can see where the staff's response is, I just disagree, and I wanted to have that discussion here, because I think that a lot of these comments would be dealt with if we gave a little bit more, I know it's in context with the main public involvement plan, and that's okay, because we just need it broad, but this is a specific plan for the MTP. I think they should have more of a role. I think they should have more of a formal role. And, but it has to be not just comments all the thing. It has to be, they have to have a quorum and they have to have a majority vote on agreeing to those comments. So that they do have, their role is more important, and so that it's not just a committee that's just gonna disappear because they don't have value. I think they have tremendous value, and we should be utilizing it. So, that's my soapbox for today.
If I can respond. I guess if I were to respond to that, I would say that's exactly how they're envisioned. They are our advisory committee that is designed to be a geographic mix of every single assembly district in this city. And so, just like the Technical Advisory Committee and the Freight Advisory Committee, BPAC, items will be taken before them as a business item. They will need to, just like this committee does, formally move. They have to have a quorum. They're constituted just like this committee, and we will be taking all the items to them in a formal manner. So I think we maybe can wordsmith things here, but we will. That's the plan, to take this through as a formal method, just like we do all of our committees.
So can you
with
show
all
me-
recommendations to the
Can you
vote.
show me how that's identified here in the plan?
I guess I would say it's identified in our main public involvement plan, which is how this is kind of pulled through. This is, a piece of this.
Show me, I mean, not to be adversarial, but can you show me on this plan for this project where the Citizens Advisory Committee is acting on items? Which items they were?
All I can tell you is on page 6 where it talks about the Citizen Advisory Committee, it says, "Citizen Advisory reviews transportation plans and programs, et cetera, et cetera." And they receive drafts of informational items, and it says not for formal approval, but, I mean, that's what it says about all these committees. They don't approve this.
Right.
You don't approve it.
So maybe the.
Usually anyway.
Maybe the first thing would be, not, but for formal recommendation. The thing about it is that we're not answering their questions, and I couldn't find anything in the document.
This is taken directly out of our public involvement plan, which also, I mean, it doesn't say the TAC makes any formal approval
Like
either.
you said,
Tables.
you have the big circle.
Table.
Table.
Table 3.
Starting on
Table three.
page 20.
Page 20. It talks about the deliverables and the reviews and approvals, and it does go through who's reviewing, who's approving, who's making a recommendation on this. And you'll see that we do have the Citizens Advisory Committee doing reviews of a lot of things. When we put recommend, that's the more kind of formal, what you guys do, because everything goes to the TAC before it goes to the policy committee. When we talk about review by the Citizens Advisory Committee, that gives them the opportunity to provide some kind of formal response to whatever we've given them that comes to you guys for review.
There's not one form recommend on here. There's not a recommend on here, so review.
On page 20, it says provide written comments on the agenda. So that's the definition of the review, the glasses there.
Right.
But I have to ask you, I'm uncomfortable doing this way. I think we should have the internal process for the Citizens Advisory Committee hammered out so that we don't have to do it this way. I think it's awkward to do it this way.
Well, what I'm trying to do is, we have comments
Yes.
and response. And I'm trying to figure out how it works based on how we're trying to set that thing. We set up the Citizens Advisory Committee, and there is no recommendation, but he just said that they would, but there isn't any here that's identified. And I think it's a fair comment that they had, and it hasn't been responded to.
It is a fair comment, but their process has not been fully identified yet. Their formal process among themselves, they really haven't galvanized very well. I mean, yet. They send comments to each other. I mean,
As a freshman, they're a
Yes.
freshman committee. This is their first time through this. They're still trying to figure out, they want to be engaged as a group of, as a group of citizens. They are interested. They are volunteers and are providing a different level of engagement at any given time is what I noticed with this process. My fear is burning them out. My fear, you have some that are really gung-ho and are ready to dive in and want to make a resolution. And then there's others that I can get them to commit to 4 meetings a year. So I think we need to be careful in what exact level we're asking them to engage in at this point until they truly understand what that means for them. I mean, we have some ex-DOT, ex-AMATS committee members, things like that, people that know this inside and out. The other members, those are the ones that we're trying to get on board and to formalize this process. And so on some level, we also want them to have ownership in that. So without us telling them, you will make a formal resolution and wanting them to work that out amongst themselves and their committee. So if that's guidance that you would like us to take back to the committee, that you want formal recommendations for each item, I think we should let them know that that's the expectation. I think right now they're still feeling their way out through this.
And I guess in me reading this comment, when I read the comment, and it says if your CAC only had to review and consultation role, they kind of do. I mean, and all of the advisory committees are that way. They come in, they have their formal recommendations that they make to us. It's up to us as to whether or not we modify any of these documents and then forward those recommendations generally to the policy committee. So I guess as I read this, I didn't know whether or not they're just saying they want a bigger role and actually having veto power, I mean, of looking at this, I don't know, like that's the point, is when you're just reading text, we could be losing context on what this actual comment is about. And I mean, because my understanding is that the Freight Advisory Committee, the Bike Ped Advisory Committee, the Citizens Advisory Committee, when they're reviewing it, they're still reviewing it very similar to the way we do, and hopefully making, formal recommendations as to what that committee actually, comes to a consensus about. So this is a difficult one for me because I read it a little differently than you did. So.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Should the TAC then give guidance to all of the Freight, UPAC, and Citizens Advisory Committee? Should that be a refinement of how they do their business? And somewhere, to put that somewhere in the bylaw or somewhere, so that it's clear what they have to do, how they conduct their business.
Historically, resolutions and formal comment like that has only come from the PCC, correct?
No, we get them, the air quality committee did too. Because whenever they had, the air quality plans came through, or the conformity comes through, they'd make formal recommendations on this document.
And we do have the Air Quality Committee actually making a recommendation on the air quality, because we're trying to show the different levels of where they stand in the hierarchy of the committees. And so air quality does make a recommendation that's coming forward on this. The Citizens Advisory Committee and the BPAC and stuff, they make a recommendation to you guys, but it's kind of at a different level than when you make a recommendation to the policy committee. And it was really hard to put that in words, so we tried to do icons since icons are easier for people to understand.
Well, I look at what we used to get from the Planning and Zoning Commission, right? Those are a formal set of comments. And there was a resolution that came from them, and there was very specific items that we took to them, that they got comments on. I'm just saying that we're not even to the level of that.
But they're like an established body that has certain ways of doing things, and they must do it. This is a much more relaxed body than planning and zoning.
Right, but we should have expectations of what we need, right? Shouldn't there be a level of expectation?
The resolutions that came from P&Z were required by P&Z. They were required by AMATS. They have to do that if they have any items on their agenda, any public items, they're required that, so.
So the question is for us, is the TAC, is what do we want to see? Do we have an expectation from the Citizens Advisory Committee that may not be as well coordinated really as, I mean, the Planning and Zoning Commission is a set commission, you know, appointed, I mean, and whether or not we have the same expectations.
Do you want 11 comments, all of the board, or do you want them narrowed down, and all the comments narrowed down to items, specific items that are recommended, so it's easier for this body to take those recommendations and make decisions to forward on to the policy.
If I, you know, just looking at this, there's 63 comments, 59 of them are all from Citizens Advisory Committee. And
if they filtered it themselves, that to me would be.
well, from my perspective, if this is their first time through this, I think we need to find a better or different way to engage as far as what their expectations are and what our expectations are. Because are they going to do this on everything coming forth?
Probably.
Okay, well, then we might as well just schedule this meeting every week.
Yeah.
I think we need to have.
I guess I'm confused as staff, trying to understand what you're talking about. These comments are filtered out to the ones that are recommendations that are, you know, staff recommendations. We're gonna have to bring you all of the comments regardless of if they're filtered through the CAC or not.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not gonna sit there and be able to eliminate, so we're not gonna cut down the time it takes to do these things. So I'm not really sure, you're asking us to go to the CAC and have them basically see, these are the ones we want changed, whereas the rest are just kind of comments that came in.
We'll send these out like a week in advance.
We did.
This was out,
These
this was in the
were-
packet.
Yeah.
It was in the packet, but it wasn't sent out separately.
We usually always include.
I mean, this is actually not that many. They could get a lot bigger.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So would you like to have comments by topic area, for example, or by page number, so that we can do them all together? We've done that in the past with issue comment response summaries.
Well, if you ask it from faster, that would probably be.
And have the committee do that. Have them.
You're asking volunteers to prepare staff level work at that point.
I know that.
Yeah.
Well, I know the freight comments were in order, the comments and responses on the freight advisory plan. It's just new, right? We got comment from who, what it was, response, but it's, you know, it's in the order of the document, it's not.
So we just created an online form that will lend itself to that. That's the spreadsheet that Dan's talking about. It'll be in section, so it'll be time, date stamped, it'll be section, it'll be page, and then it'll go into one comment by each comment. So this was their first time providing comments on a document. It went out and they responded. So I'm grateful that they responded, and we are refining our process, absolutely. So we've already taken steps on that for Tech Memo 1A and B. When you say they responded, I guess, did they respond as individuals or did they respond as a committee? So they responded individually in a group email, if that makes sense.
So here's how I look at it. So you have all these comments, which you're right, we're gonna need to see all the comments, because that's just what we do, right? But as a committee, did they recommend that this get approved?
Yeah.
Did they recommend if there's any major problems that are, you know, done, over things that are, stop, this is wrong, this is bad, we have a problem. I mean, we don't know any of that. That's what it's a way to, we still have all the comments, but there still should have been some kind of, yay, we approve it, but we'd like to see these edits, or no, we don't recommend approval of this because there's these fatal flaws. So there's this layer, and I haven't articulated it very well, but that's pretty much what I was hoping for. And what's happening is I think that that's kind of, this is how I reflected on their comments, was they didn't have a way of synthesizing it all down to either, yeah, we want to approve it, but these are the main problems, or these are, it's okay, just we need to fix it.
Yeah, because some of these are just minor edits of terminology being used, you know, rather than saying something.
Or an education process.
Saying efficient, so.
And then kind of when we were going through these, there was nothing out here that was a major stop doing what you're doing. For the tech memos and stuff, the plan is to get some kind of something from them, whether it's a formal recommendation or whatever they want to come up with to bring forward to you guys. It's just because of how this.
It's our first
Yes.
one, so I'm
And
just
so,
saying,
yes.
from my perspective on expectations, we should have had a recommendation whether this plan, they thought should be approved.
Although there is comment number 2 that says the PIP appears to be comprehensive and should result in
Right, but these
public
are
input.
all-
Yes, there we go.
I like that one.
Done.
Okay, so, I mean, we're on.
Anyway, there we go, that was the point.
Well, I have a question for us. I mean, if we want to go through these page by page, do we want to discuss the ones that are highlighted that actually resulted in edits? It is 4 o'clock right now. If there's anything, I mean, I was reading through this, and I read through this while we were sitting here, and there was nothing in here that I thought was a game changer, per se.
It's not, I just
Yeah.
thought that there just needed to be a little bit more, an overall.
I get where you're going.
We approve that, we think as a body that it's in the right direction, you know, we think it should be approved, we just would like to have these edits. That's a whole different approach, and here's all of our comments. We don't know what they did, I mean, we don't know what they feel as a whole, as a body.
Yeah.
Because you could have some that don't like it, and some that do.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, that may necessitate their having more meetings. I think they're not averse to that, right, Jeannie?
No, I don't see them being adverse. I see what I've been able to get them to commit to right now is 4. So anything additional, we may have a problem getting quorum or whatnot. And so I think we might just have to throw it out there.
If you have we've done this sometimes, if everybody agrees, send an email around, yeah, we agree.
Right. And we've talked about that, for sure.
So you have to be.
We do
creative
vote
like
by
that.
email, exactly.
I'm not saying how you do it, I'm just saying it should have something.
Yep, and we've discussed that. So,
I think going over just the yellow would be fine. Just want to do that real quick.
Okay.
I've had my major issue addressed, so.
Is the rest of the, are we all okay with, like, maybe what we stuff is, are we okay to run through with the yellows? Okay. So the first one was adding more, I guess, this is adding more people to the stakeholders, but you said that there was a comment regarding, is there a response regarding the stakeholders in which we were making an edit saying that it is not just these?
Jamie, is there one
Sorry,
specific
I'm making a
addition
note.
that we made clarifying that this is not an exhaustive list of
yes,
stakeholders?
so
What comment is that?
it was
18.
Bob French's comment, number 18. We will indicate there in section 5.3 that table 1 outlines a list of potential stakeholders that is not intended to be exhaustive. And next time there will be a page and section number for you. This is our trial run. Yay, learning.
This is why we're doing it.
Okay.
So, based on that one page you have, what was it, Citizens Advisory Committee, the CEC receives drafts as informational items, not for approval, but may recommend, but provide the opportunity to collaborate, provide comments, and make recommendations to the AMATS cases.
I'm sorry?
Page 6.
If we make that, and this is, I'm asking this, If we make that change to the Citizens Advisory Committee, is our intent to change that for the Bike and Ped and Freight Advisory Committees as well? Or just to the Citizens Advisory Committee? Because, I mean, the language is consistent throughout for those advisory committees, so I'm asking really if our intent is to change it, to get that specific with the CAC, are we going to get that specific with everybody else?
I think everybody should be making recommendations. I just think it's a clarifying thing, so they know that that what their job duties are.
So comment 6 says to make a formal recommendation if desired. Is that, no, excuse
For
me.
their comment on which number?
I don't know which comment we're on. I'm not sure.
So,
You're saying on page 6 where it says, because on page 6, it says the CAC will receive drafts as informational items, not for formal approval, but to provide the opportunity to collaborate on working drafts, and will provide comments to the AMATS TAC. Do we just want to say we'll provide comments and recommendations?
yes.
If desired, because they may not always actually make a recommendation.
That's true. I guess
That's
you could
fine.
say.
So if we put that would be, because that's kind of, that, and Vivian was talking about comment 6 on this sheet is kind of talking about
Right,
that.
right. Exactly. So, move to approve the edit to add and will provide comments and recommendations as desired to the AMATS TAC.
Moved by Ms. Howe, seconded by Mr. Leslie. Are there any opposed to that edit? And I guess I don't know, this is point of clarification. Are we doing this only to the CAC, or are we doing this to the other
I
advisory?
think it make it as a time that we use for everybody, but that's out of the.
FEC.
Well, I'm just saying. Yeah, okay. Any opposed to that edit? No.
But if we are approving the PIP today with amendments, why couldn't we add that language to each of these seats here?
Oh, to all the statements?
That's what I was asking, because all of them have that same
Yes,
language.
it would be all the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's to the CAC, the BPAC, and
Yes.
the Freight Advisory. That was mine. All right, are you opposed to that?
That's where I thought we were going.
Okay, all right. So still.
I was looking at their bylaws. These are the thinking bylaws.
No, yeah, no, I was
Yes,
thinking in here.
all of them.
Okay.
Do you have that, Lori?
I'll be listening to
We were adding, all right, for all of the advisory committees at the end, when it says, they all end with, and will provide comments to the AMATS TAC, we want that to read, will provide comments and recommendations as desired to the TAC.
and or.
The earlier before.
And or.
I think and or is fine. I don't want to say actually and or. We're not saying that they have to provide that, but yeah. Okay. Okay, Tom, that's good?
Yep.
Yes. Guess why is the highlighted yellow in comment number 9?
The comment was provided with the highlighting, the yellow highlighting, so I just didn't take it out.
Oh, okay. So that's not your highlighting the action or
Nope.
anything?
Comment
Okay,
was
so there's really
highlighted
nothing
by
on
CAC.
number 2.
Sorry, no.
Okay, just
No.
yellow draws the eye.
No corrective actions were taken on the comments themselves, so if there's misspellings or other things like that.
I love typos.
Yeah, I noticed.
Awful.
I saw. I've been
It
sitting
made my
here-
head hurt.
I've been spell correcting them myself as I've gone through. So.
Gotta leave them
But it
as
was
they-
important to leave them as they were.
Yes. So we're item 13, we're on page 3, 13. Oh, it looks like you guys just modified and take out the word mean.
Yes.
Oh, we don't want mean meetings? I had to go back and read the document and say, oh yeah, it did say mean and mean. I didn't take that in context, but that's okay.
Yeah, the mean.
Although I don't know, Jim, are you going to be in the meeting? No?
It's not really this fall.
I know. The meeting is this fall. No, go on in, go on. That was 13, 14, yes.
Oh, this is
Yes, I think 14 is what we just did.
So I have a question. It's slightly different. It says recommend approval.
That's for the TAC and air quality, so it's a different
Duties.
committee.
Oh, yeah, the roles are TCO quality. Okay. We're going to comment 18 then?
Yes.
This is stakeholder, you went over that one. Yep. Okay. Yep. So cover page, are we, what number are we on? Sorry. Cover page, spelling out AMATS?
Yes.
Yeah. Stakeholders, yeah. 27 stakeholders. 28 stakeholders. Oh wow, this whole page.
Lots of stakeholders being requested added.
Number 39. Okay. Doesn't just need any credit. And then that, you made the comment about not using first person, right, or using, yeah.
Remove first person, use proper.
Okay.
Cover now.
I don't understand first three.
You don't understand 33?
It carries over to the next page.
Oh.
It just says
Oh.
What happened to page 6?
So they're recommending adding the separate development stuff, so to make it clear. Right, that makes sense. Great.
So on 47,
Yes.
so you just reiterated what was already in the document?
No, so this is actually guidance from the International Association of Public Participation, and it's kind of their best practices and what it means to have effective community engagement. It's what guides
But
our.
when you're, but in the context that it's acting, this asking is, what is effective community engagement? So what are you striving to get to, is how I'm taking that comment. So if there's no action and no including anything in there, it's just still listening to that question.
So I guess I wasn't sure if he was asking for specific techniques, if he was trying to get at, or if he really wanted a definition of what effective community engagement looks like. That's how I took it. What is the outcome of effective community engagement? And how do you hold it and how do you have it? So I'm open to your suggestions.
I don't, what page is that on?
Well, it's the, no, strategy.
Oh,
No, this is
this does
just-
not come out of the document at all. These bullet points don't come out of the document.
No, I mean, it's the very first statement within the section 4 strategy says effective community engagement is essential to developing an MCP for AMATS that reflects community desires. And the question, this is, what is effective community engagement?
Please define.
I don't know that there, I mean, how do you,
Without having measurement and metrics to see was it effective, it's kind of a chicken and the egg question
Right, so
to
maybe
me.
you should, maybe those terms should be used.
Do we have anything in our public participation plan?
Yeah, our main
About-
override.
We have metrics in our public participation plan about, how we will measure the effectiveness of public participation. I mean, we can address that.
So you have the ability I mean, assuming that that's approved and you meet whatever those metrics are, then
I think it goes beyond just the metrics. I think sometimes it's things that you can't see and you can't measure. And I guess that's why I answered it this way. But I'm more than willing to dump the metrics in there for sure. It would just be by strategies and, would outline each of that. And I think there's actually a question later in the table about metrics, evaluation, yeah. Question 50 talks about our strategies and how we, that's preferred alternative, sorry.
Either that or the strategy, or, maybe it's the goal is to get as much public involvement as possible. I mean, just that simple. And, because when we get fancy words, then they're gonna be like, well, what does that mean? Because the way you define it, but you really can't.
It means something different for each person.
Right.
Yeah.
we all have possibly more practical. Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise we could end up with word.
Right. I don't know anybody wants to do that one.
I don't know that you could, it's not something tangible for each person.
well, it's not, and it's gonna base, yeah. I don't know if you should add reference that, the public participation plan adopted by AMATS has set metrics for public engagement as it is. So, I mean, I don't know if we should include that sort of information in this section because you made the comment that really one of the comments we did get back from FHWA is, if you don't have enough, what is enough community engagement? If you don't have enough comments, enough everything, that sort of thing. So that is tough. I don't know if we have stuff within the PPP that we can reference. So this might be the appropriate location to do so.
Well,
Yeah.
that would get the FHWA off the back, say, here's our approved metrics, and we met them, and so.
I'm sorry, Brian, can you say?
Well, if we refer back to our own metrics and demonstrating that we're meeting them, then that may give us something to fight back FHWA with.
I'll definitely reference that in.
We could also talk about the goals of the AMATS public participation plan on page 2 and 3 and guiding principles, to add a little bit more depth to
Yeah.
that.
So I move that staff go and relook a little bit on comment number 47 and see what you can do with that one.
Do you want to see that before it goes out? No. Just do it.
He seconded.
He seconded. Are there any opposed to that motion? No? Okay. Mayor move. So we are on number 48. 48 is with that one, exactly. C number 47.
Did you do 49? Is that because we have the working draft language and we have all the committees?
For the how working drafts be shared.
Yeah.
So we struck the language in order to stay on schedule because it referenced an earlier comment about pushing the public to participate based on a schedule. and really kind of driving that public participation because we have to and we have a deadline and things like that. So that text was struck. And I believe in section 4 it talks about the wording.
It will be, it hasn't actually been done.
I'm sorry, it will be struck. And then
So the paragraph is going to change to say the greatest extent practical, the PIP will rely upon existing AMATS mechanisms for public review, so the CAC, TAC, PC, AMATS committees on special topics will be invited to participate as well. And then we'll just say formal approval via AMATS committees will be reserved for public review, draft, public hearing, draft in 2018-19.
Thank you.
So stakeholders. So do we have phase 1 and phase 2?
We are in phase 1 currently.
Okay. Is that defined any, like they said?
In the tables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it's just confusing having a phase 1 kind of hanging out there before you get to the
Not
tables.
really mentioned, and then jump into phase 2.
So, just go back, so in, on number, what was that?
54.
On the 49 for her working draft, so in the response to comments besides just striking out, can you refer to the page that she read? You'll add that? Okay.
Okay, stakeholders.
So on number 59 as well. The text doesn't respond to the question. So is there a way to?
So the different tools are defined on page 4. So we'll make reference to that. And then the timing that we will employ those tools are also sort of laid out in the tables. You know, we mentioned that we'll go into the emails, the website will be live, things like
Right,
that.
so
So I'll
I-
make sure to reference
Yeah,
that.
I would just reference those under response. And if we miss any of those kind of things, where you're just doing strikes and you're not referencing or editing,
Yeah.
that probably just needs to be good.
So AMATS for 61, remove all references to activity and meeting locations.
Yes. So in table 2, correct?
And dates, we need to edit that and say dates also.
I don't think we have dates in here though.
Were there activity?
They're just simply dates. We don't have specific dates. So one of the things that the team had talked about was making sure that there's a equity in the meeting locations and the times. And if we're bringing something to Anchorage, we're doing complimentary in Eagle River as well, so that everybody's getting the same information. So we need to go through and look at what we have presented and what we have contractor dollars for and what we have staff time for. So, and then we'll make adjustments to that.
Are you gonna have a meeting out there, a PAC meeting or policy meeting
the outing order?
We have done that in the past, but I brought that up and it didn't seem to go over very well. It's what your pleasure is, if you would like to
Well,
do that.
I don't know, I'm just curious if that was thought of.
That's a good question. I think we've done that in the past, and it was very much appreciated by the people in Chugaga River. But I don't know if you set up expectations that you continue doing that, if you start that, so.
It's 4:26.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to extend, or?
I think it's good.
Okay, have we finished all the ones, and everything we wanted to? Okay.
Madam Chair, there's also a staff recommendation to delete the specific contact on page 25 and replace that with the icon for the infographic.
Yes, I don't think we have to start for that.
We should call the, what? I think it's the call for the vote. Motion with all the edits.
Well, you already had a motion.
We get the back.
We've already moved on all the edits that we had to propose thus far. Okay, so we're back to the main motion. Yeah, we've already done public comment, so
Yeah,
now,
that's the main motion.
Okay.
No, we don't need to, it's the main motion.
we got 3 minutes. There's still technically 3 other things on.
But we're done with this.
Yes. So I guess we're back to the main motion with it, so. We already done all the edits. Are we saying that we agree with all the edits? I guess we did individual edits, we agree with all the edits as far as staff recommended. I don't know, we have did your main motion have that?
The main motion said to approve the thing in its entirety, and then we made the edits, and now we have to act on it, so I can change the main motion to.
No, we did, what I'm saying is we did specific edits that we were changing beyond what staff recommended. We also need to do one for all the edits that staff already recommended in here as well.
I think so, it's an action item, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm gonna change my motion to move to approve the public involvement plan for the MTP, including all the staff edits and all the amendments.
Okay. Sorry, just quick,
No, no,
making
that's
sure we're
okay.
getting all clarified. Are there any opposed to that motion? Okay. Hearing none. We are done. Thank you. Now, we do.
Get it. I promise.
Technically at 4:28 PM, and we do have a couple people here for informational reports. So the question is whether or not we want to extend for a brief period of time to accommodate them. Their ability, if we have the ability.
We can
to.
hold the OB report, that's not pressing.
Okay.
The information on the update, it's just so you have it in front of you, and it'll be up before you the next time for approval. Hand it to you.
Okay. But we do.
Mr. Lindewood has some concerns about that, so. There may be a way. We've talked
I have
about work
expressed
session
those
about that.
concerns in an email. I think the committee has them, and so I will simply put that in your capable hands to figure out how you want to handle
Have a work session.
There you go.
And do that.
So that's first off, is that the updates. Do we have anybody here? We do have somebody here for the Seward Highway.
How much?
Nothing big on the Seward Highway project is going to be happening in the next month.
All right, okay. Are there any other committee comments then?
So if we just read this, we're good?
That'll, it's been 10 years in the making. There's a lot more information than that. It's a $200 million project, so it's got some things going on.
I apologize for the international items. I did not get to go today for going through that. We'll see you again soon. Like I said, are there any other committee comments?
Oh, I need, this is my
Quickly.
day.
Yeah.
Terry Buck, please stand up. This is Terry, who in a couple months will take my place, and I'll go back to Boston and she's new, and she doesn't have much agricultural experience, so she's gonna try to follow us around and learn all the stuff, and she's trying to read everything, so welcome.
Spell your name for me.
T-E-R-I and Buck, B-U-C-K.
Just making sure, and it gets stuck in, I'm a visual person, so when I write it, I remember it, so. Now you get to see what you're gonna be a part of. Welcome.
Sure.
Any, I know there, I guess, other committee comments? I know, do you want to say anything about?
Sure, absolutely. There's a Public Transportation Advisory Board meeting in an hour, 5:30, downtown City Hall. Additionally to that, for those of you that might have been watching the news, we have moved forward with a public transportation plan that largely revises the way that we operate services in the confines of Anchorage through public transportation. I find myself clarifying that we as an agency oversee 3 brands, People Mover, one of them, Anchor Rides, and Rideshare. So this is a sort of partially a consolidation process that leverages those 3 brands a bit better. And largely it's a move that creates a greater level of efficiency that gears towards meeting people where they are the densest within the bowl, within proximity of the jobs that are the highest in the bowl. And all of this can be found on peoplemover.org. If you click on the link there, it'll show you what the old map looks like versus what the new one is. And the implementation timeframe is October 23rd in terms of rollout.
Any other committee comments from the board? And there is one, I guess, are there any public comments before we close the meeting? All right, hearing none. Yeah, get it out with us.